In the last video, I showed you how to use a mason jar in your shop vac to change the oil in your lawnmower. Then after that, I showed you how to put the container inside your shop vac so you could change your lawnmower oil. And from those two videos, many commenters asked me if I could make something to suck the oil out of their car. Well, here it is, and it'll not only suck the oil out of your car, it'll also suck out the transmission fluid, the brake fluid, or the power steering fluid. And it's also perfect for ride-on lawnmowers, motorcycles, rototillers, jet skis, pressure washers, ATVs, and inboard and outboard motors. No-brainer disclaimer, never use this device to suck up gasoline. So this is a fun project to make, and it's pretty straightforward how it works. First, there's the on-off switch. Next to that is a small vacuum pump, which are pretty easy to find. And then the holding tank is ABS or PVC 4-inch pipe. So first the little compressor / vacuum pump. You could find them in any small water coolers or bar fridges. People are either throwing them out at the end of their driveway, or you can find them for around 25 bucks on Kijiji or Marketplace. You can see the little compressor sitting right in there. Something had damaged the coil on the back of this one. That's probably why it didn't work. When I cut the pipe on this one outside, it confirmed that there was no gas left in it at all. If you suspect that the one you have does have a charge in it, ask an HVAC buddy the best way to depressurize it, and then just go about dismantling it and taking the compressor out. And when you get it out, you'll have this tiny little compressor with this heavy-duty plug already attached. This cover easily comes off. This ground isn't being used anymore, so I'll just eliminate it. In this water cooler, the black and blue wire went to a thermostat. I eliminated the blue wire, put a new end on the black wire, and hooked it directly to the compressor. So you're probably thinking at this point, why not just use a shop vac as the suction instead of going to all this trouble getting this little compressor? Well, let me show you how much sucking power a regular shop vac has using this vacuum gauge. And you can see that my shop vac has 4 inches of mercury. Now we'll test my central vac. My central vac is a bit more powerful at 5 inches of mercury. Now let's test our little compressor / vacuum pump. This took about 25 seconds, so I sped it up. You can see that these are way more powerful than a shop vac, and why it's the perfect pump for this oil sucker. Plus, when they're running, you can only hear a light hum. And here's the reservoir. The bottom is just a 4-inch cap. The main body is 4-inch pipe. This is a 4-inch to 1.5 inch reducer. And this top piece is an 1.5 inch threaded cap. At the top, I use these flexible pieces of hose so you could easily disconnect and connect the plastic tubing. And you may be wondering what this brake clip is for. I just put it on there to remind me that this is the side that sucks the oil. So when you make the reservoir to hold the oil, you can make it as big as you want or as small as you want. So for example, if you wanted to make one that held 3 quarts, you just cut it 15 inches long. But add another 3 inches to any size that you do make it, just for a little bit of airspace. So in this example for the 3 quarts, it would be 18 inches long. And if you're using metric, 127 millimeters equals 1 liter. Then add 75 millimeters to your final length for airspace. The one that I built holds 6 liters or 6 quarts. To glue it all together, I just use silicone adhesive. That way, if you need to get it apart, you can just use a hammer and tap the fitting off of it. Or you can use ABS or PVC glue. In the first version that I made when I was experimenting, I used a 4-inch cap. I found that with the size of the cap and with the tubes going through it, it made it really difficult to unthread it. I also found using vinyl tube that if the oil was too warm, the hose would droop and it would seal it off. And plus I found it really wasn't necessary to use 2 different sizes of tubing. Plus another thing with a large opening was when I went to empty the reservoir, when I tipped it over, the oil would come rushing out too fast. I found that this refrigerator water tubing was much better. It could handle the heat and wouldn't droop as easily. I went with this 1/4 inch size for both to keep it simple. And to make it easy to connect and disconnect, I used this 1/4 inch fuel hose. This fridge tubing fits directly inside of the hose without much resistance. But it wasn't a perfect seal and I didn't want to use a bunch of hose clamps. So I found a solution. Just find a drill bit that fits inside of the pipe. You may want to put some masking tape around the flutes of the drill so you don't cut your fingers. Then take a small butane torch and run it around the top edge of the plastic tubing. You can see how it creates this little ridge so it seals much better. Still easy to push together and creates a perfect seal. Now I'll show you how to attach the fridge hose without using fittings. Grab yourself a test piece of the ABS or PVC and drill some holes in it that are smaller than the outside diameter of the plastic tubing. And in my case, I found that a 15/64 inch drill was perfect. Then take your plastic tubing and cut it at a severe angle with your knife. Then in your test piece, use a pair of needle nose pliers to pull it through. And as you can see, this chokes the pipe and creates a perfect seal. So then I took my 4" to 1.5" reducer, drilled it out, and pulled my pipe through. Pull the oil sucking side through about 3 inches and the suction side about 1 inch. This will prevent the oil from getting sucked directly into the pump. And if you're wondering what these marks are over here, I was testing out another method and I just filled the holes with epoxy when I was finished. The one thing you want to do before you really get started on this project is to make sure that that 1/4 inch plastic tube will fit down your dipstick tube. You can see that this fridge tubing is coily and it won't stay straight. Let's pretend that this is your dipstick tube. When you put the tube down it, you can see that it coils around and it doesn't even want to go into the oil. So let me show you what you have to do to the piece that slides down the dipstick tube. Measure yourself a piece and cut it at 44 inches. This will be the perfect length for most cars. So just use a scrap piece of wood and 1 screw, screw it into a joist, and for this next step, have a pair of safety gloves, tongs, and a pair of vice grips ready. Bring some water to a boil and then throw the tubing in for 1 minute. Use the tongs to lift it out, put the vice grips on the end, then tighten it down under the block and let it hang from the vice grips. Once it's cooled, it's perfect for slipping down the dipstick tube. The reservoir is really easy to remove and put back on. Just cut 2 pieces of the 4" pipe 1.5 inches long, and then mark it from the outside of the pipe at the 4" mark. And then 1 countersunk screw to hold each of them on. This makes it nice and easy to remove, empty, and put back in the stand. And in the electrical box, we added the switch to the black wire, connected the white wires, connected the grounds, and grounded it to the box. This is just a 2x4, and I added 2 screws up from the bottom. I made up this little plate for added support, and when I'm emptying it, I added the screw to hold the cap. I also added this handle to help move it around. And the one last thing that I found that I needed to add was a vacuum gauge, so that I could tell if I had any vacuum leaks and if the pump was working properly. I found this nice little thread in one. If you want one, I'll have it linked in the description below. I just used a 3/8 inch drill bit, drilled a hole, and threaded it in. Now let's give it a test. I also sped this up. It took an actual 3.5 minutes. You don't want to suck up the oil when it's hot, but if you can just put your hand on the engine and keep it there, it's just warm enough. Now slide the tube in until you can just feel it touching the bottom. It starts out slow, and then as it builds vacuum, it starts to draw it out faster and faster. And then when you reach the bottom, it'll start to suck air and do this. My RAV4 holds just under 5 liters and it took just over 8 minutes to suck it all out. I found the best way to stop this tube from dripping oil later is just to take some WD-40 and squirt it down the tube as the vacuum is still going. Draining is really easy with the 1.5 inch cap instead of the 4 inch that I had before. And I found that the best place to store the pipe is right inside so it stays nice and straight. And any residual oil that's still in the pipe will just drain into the tank. So let's have a look and see if it got most of the oil. So I let it drip for another 5 minutes and this is all that was remaining in the pan. That little bit is not bad at all. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to get notifications, and we'll see you next time.